Today I want to go over some real basics. How to read. Something we tend to pick up roughly around age 6 or so. We start with it. Some of you smarter ones, maybe a little earlier. In general, we start off very basic and we move on from there, and then at a certain point, hey, we're smart. We can read lots of different stuff. But the fundamentals are always the same. And it always strikes me how remarkable it is that you can read very sophisticated stuff. Wow, I'm smart. I read smart stuff. And still have no idea what you're doing at the time. So I want to take a few minutes and just go over this. And I'll get to now, later. Reading is a universal skill. Reading takes place in every area of our life, especially these days when we are lugging around little machines that give us reading to do at all points of the day. So it is not just about reading great works of literature and, oh yes, this is great works of literature. And, wow, yeah, this is for smart stuff. So I want to go over a couple of things in stuff that is not great literature. Stuff that is not art, necessarily, as we would know it. In the world today, we are all processing information, is the word that gets tossed around an awful lot. So I generated some texts of information. These are news stories, the sort of stories you would hear or see on a local newscast. That itself is very specific, and we'll get to that. But I want to be able to objectify a little bit and not have this cloud of great literature hanging over it. There are some basics to reading, some very elemental skills. And each text we approach is both unique and common, because we always approach stuff the same way, or at least we should. We approach a text saying, what the hell is this? And that's the way it should be. Don't grant it, literature. Don't grant it that high and mighty pedestal stuff. Don't come to it, humbled, necessarily. Yes, when we read stuff from this book, these are great works of literature. These people who wrote this stuff centuries ago, millennia ago, they're pretty smart. And the reason that their works have lasted this long has an awful lot to do with the fact that they were pretty smart and continue to be so. They still have stuff to teach us. But believing in that too much creates a lot of sloppy thought. You don't want to go into every reading situation scared. So we're just going to go over some basics here. How to approach something. And the first questions you always ask in anything is to figure out the basics. What's going on here? In any sort of a chunk of information, there is a baseline of data to be processed. For the record, I wrote these myself, so you know they're not particularly genius. This is imagined as news items on a ordinary local newscast. the kind I wrote at an earlier iteration of my career. I would jam out half a dozen of these an hour and never once actually wake up while doing so when I worked the overnights. Also, for the record, I made up this country. Why get into specifics? 19 people are dead following a government crackdown on protesters in Maluga. Details are still just coming in. It began as a political protest in front of the presidential palace, but police started launching tear gas into the crowd. Gunfire soon followed. This comes after weeks of escalating tension between leaders in Maluga and human rights groups. This is the length and detail you would expect of a story that is breaking news, just happening, just gets thrown across the wire. What can we tell about this text? What is it communicating?
What is it telling us?
Yeah.
It's giving us breaking news of what is happening around the world, or in Maluga, for example.
Yeah. Not much more than that. It's very stripped down. It's very simple. There's not much beyond the literal value of this text. These are just facts. Facts getting tossed out at you. This is the sort of story when you see something, still just coming in. It tells you that this is happening fairly recently. We don't have a lot of information. We're trying to process it. This is a fairly standard trope of broadcast news. By saying details are just coming in, that sort of excuses you from not having an awful lot of details to report. But when you say that, it also gives an impression. What is the impression? You don't have all the facts. Very good. There's an awful lot of background to this that we're not going into. Weeks of escalating tension. When you see weeks of escalating tension, what does that communicate?
This has been coming.
What's that?
This has been a long time coming.
This has been a long time coming. There are a lot of details, but we're not going to go into them right now. Weeks of escalating tension means that there are probably issues that have been festering for months, years, decades, generations. That's the way the world sometimes is. But in this breaking news type environment, we don't have time for all that. We're just going to give you the facts and then move on. You never get long stuff in broadcasting. If you want big background, you got to go to increasingly less even newspapers, but like long magazine features on problems, Time magazine, The Atlantic, and stuff like that. But because of this quickness to it, it is telling you how to read it. It is making you conclude that, well, all right, the just the facts style has some gaps in it, and they're taking advantage of it right now. Who is telling this story? Oh. Me? Okay, sure. Yes, me or the news reporter. Is it someone from the fictional country of Maluga? No. How can you tell that?
I would imagine it'd be a lot more personal.
It would be more personal. You probably wouldn't refer to it specifically as the country. If you are local Channel 7 Maluga, you would probably say, it's happening on 18th Street.
Yeah, it would have more details.
It would probably have more details. You could probably get more specific in alluding to the detail or the weeks of escalating tensions. You could probably say this comes just last week. There was a protest where there was a series of arrests. They ended non-violently, but 18 people were incarcerated. You can say specific things in there that would give a sense of it being much more on the ground, much more local. So automatically you know that this is written from a certain objective distance. It doesn't actually tell you we are writing this from a objective distance. This is happening on the other side of the world. We don't really know what we're talking about. This just came in the middle of the night on a wire service, and I am reading it to you. That is the sum total of my expertise on this issue. But you can still make that calculation. You can still read that. That is not in the literal text. That is inference. That is interpretation. That is assumption. Some New Yorkers are feeling the chill inside their own homes. A series of public housing units throughout the city have lost heat. We're told this sudden cold snap caught building maintenance crews by surprise. Now they're struggling to fire up the furnaces. While some of these buildings are seeing temperatures dip into the 20s at night, a city housing spokesman says all the buildings should have heat fully operational by the end of the week. What is this communicating?
This is more local.
More local. How can you tell?
New Yorkers, and it has a lot of detail.
There are a lot of details. It does identify New Yorkers.
So it is like is it some New Yorkers? I was somewhere else I wouldn't like that. Sounds very familiar. Would it be colder like the other one?
Yeah. If you were
New Yorkers.
yeah, if this were on like a national broadcast and you're watching from sunny Arizona, would it be some New Yorkers or would it just be, well, New Yorkers?
People in New York are experiencing, there's like a bit more of a
Yeah.
distance.
There's a little bit of a hint here that, this is us. This is the kind of thing you would see maybe on like New York 1. Yeah.
They're talking about the weather as in they actually are in the same city as the other New Yorkers.
Yeah. There's a commonality of experience here. It's like, yeah, it's chilly out there. What is saying the chill up there imply in the very first sentence? They didn't have to because they're living it. There is again, commonality of experience. This is an implied context, something you can infer. This can also be a sign of perhaps, remember these things always happen in time, nothing is isolated. A story like this might be coming out of, let's say, a weather report came right before this. Or maybe another story about the weather. Whenever it's really cold out, news stations love to send out poor reporters to bundle up and talk to people about how miserable they are standing in the cold. Even though standing in the cold gets elongated if they're forced to sit there and talk to a reporter. It creates a certain intimacy that way. It implies that this is happening to all of us. This is a community story. When you see plays on words, fire up the furnaces, that is not saying turn the heat back on. That's saying it, well, it is saying that, but it's saying it in a sort of a playful way. You have a little alliteration here with the F. The F sounds get repeated. A little wordplay, a little fun. You can also see dip into. Little casual. You can make an argument that even feeling the chill is a little bit of a colloquialism. It is not simply literal language at that point. It's a little bit more playful, a little bit more figurative, a little bit more informal and chatty. The first story we had was much more simple. There was very little rhetoric going on there in the sense of trying to sound conversational. Here, this is pulling out some of stylistic chops to say, you know, well, yeah, we're just all just hanging out and having a little chat. It's nothing all that serious, nothing all that formal. Temperatures in the 20s outside means it's cold on the inside of the building, but it's not in the 20s. Yes, children and old people have to be concerned. Everybody's going to have blankets. Space heaters are always a problem. There's a risk of fire that goes along with that. But basically, this is not a serious problem just yet. So it sounds a little bit more informal, a little bit more playful, a little more casual and conversational. If it was temperatures, you know, in the sub-zeros, and people were likely to die from, you know, plunging temperatures, fire from space heaters. These things happen all the time when there's a real cold snap. If it was an urgent thing, you would have to get some of the cheesy language out of there. It would be inappropriate. It would be, you know, somebody casual saying, yeah, a lot of people are going to die tonight. That's too bad for them. But hey, for the rest of us, let's just bundle up. Ooh, I got some warm woolen socks for Christmas, and boy, am I excited. Went to Costco, got the big bucket of hot chocolate, and snuggle up. It's going to be great. How many people died? 30? Oh, well. More hot chocolate for me. There is a tone set that does not announce itself literally. But you can interpret it. You can see it as clear as anything. It is part of reading. And understanding that is the step towards sophisticated reading. Because an awful lot of what we're coming across is not literal. The words are not always on the page in the way that we think. You need to bring a little imagination to it, a little judgment. This is one of my favorites. This comes up every year. You can now take a sip of the season. Now that fall is upon us, coffee chains around the city are bringing back pumpkin spice flavors. They return every year around this time and are all the rage for a couple months, but by the time the last leaf falls off the trees, pumpkin tends to give way to candy cane and roasted chestnut for those who need a seasonal sweet. This story pops up late September, early October, right when you start getting the marketing campaigns for those god-awful pumpkin spice coffee abominations. I don't mean to editorialize like that, but let's face it, those things are. If you like pumpkin spice flavorings, good for you. You're an awful person. What do we think about this story? What's communicated here? How do we read it? Yeah.
It sounds more like a commercial or something.
It is more like a commercial. Anybody else?
It's trying to create a connection with the reader.
How so?
It's saying you one. So it's directed to the reader personally.
Uh-huh. It's very chatty. Anybody else?
I mean, it's also using us. That means like the person who's writing is included.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way.
Another connection. You and us hint very literally that we're all on the same side of this. We all love pumpkin spice, and we're all going to burn in hell for all eternity because of it. I will tell you my own pumpkin spice latte story at another time. It is a commercial, basically, because there are fewer facts here. The first story, which bemoaned its own lack of facts, still had a few of them in there. Here, it's really just one. You can now get pumpkin spice flavorings in your coffee. Boom! That's it. The tone takes great pains to make up for that. The tone tries to, through using that you and us and informality, hey, let's all get together attitude, trying to hint to everybody that this is something we can all feel good about. But also the seriousness of the language. A sip of the season? Woo. All the rage, another informal, chatty type thing. They're all the rage. Really? I can think of at least one person who doesn't like them. But by the time the last leaf falls off the trees, now we're getting downright poetic. This is like Robert Frost writing this. When the last leaf falls off the trees. Seasonal sweet, more alliteration, trying to make it playful, trying to make it fun. The whole purpose of this story, if you can call it a story and not a commercial, very good, is to create a certain mood. Maybe that is a seasonal mood. We can all feel good about this. This is the sort of story that, again, if you're watching it in time, in a broader newscast or something, this would probably go before or after a weather segment, when you get the weatherman up there saying, oh, well, yeah, we've got the first real chilly temperatures. Time to break out the sweaters. Hey, who likes apple picking? And they go through all of these seasonal cliches, which is fine. It just creates a certain bouncy fun for usually a morning audience, but not always. Just trying to make it make the watching of it an enjoyable and not taxing experience. If everything was about, political protesters being shot dead in the streets, that's a bummer. Nobody really wants to start their day with that. It's good to know, but, couch in a bunch of less serious stuff. Makes it easier to get down your breakfast in the morning and run out the door. So I would argue that for this, the literal value of this story is almost non-existent. Nothing you couldn't get from a simple advertisement. But it has a certain communicative value. It communicates that we all, are experiencing the coming of fall. We all like fall. The leaves are pretty. You get to wear sweaters. Everybody looks better in sweaters. It's just natural. Hide certain things. You know what I'm saying? It is all inference. It creates commonality. It creates community. And it is fun. But it's doing so through language. It never comes out and says, we all love fall. We all love pumpkin spice lattes. the value of the reading comes entirely from tone. And tone is a subjective judgment. Now, when I was reading these things aloud, I was perhaps dramatizing just a little bit because my tone would change. My vocal tone shifted. The first one, I'm doing Edward R. Murrow voice, very serious, just jamming out the facts. I am a very serious journalist. And by the time I get down to this, I'm just a shameless huckster who lives on hairspray trying to make my payments at the end of the week. The tone shifts. Whether I was reading it or you guys were reading it in your heads, you could see the difference. The first one is more serious, very straightforward, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. By the time we get to here, it is naturally more playful. It is naturally more informal, naturally more unserious, perhaps, but it's relying on tone to do all of its work for it. Now, when we read anything, these considerations come back. There are many points when you are reading great works of literature where you don't know what the hell is going on, and you might be really god-awful bored. And you go, this. Still more? Come on. How long does this have to be? You're allowed to have that reaction. You should have that reaction. Very often, the good writers know exactly when they are boring you. And sometimes they do it for a reason. Sometimes they will lull you into a sleepy little state, repeat the same stuff, slow down the action, nothing much happens, let's just mark some time, turn the page. They can slip an awful lot in there.